Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Welcome back to another F-Rant video. Not so much of a rant this time though, rather I have a proposal for you. The situation after the 2019 Austrian Grand Prix got me thinking about the penalty situation in Formula 1. After that race, for the better part of 3 hours, we were all left wondering whether or not Max Verstappen was going to be allowed to keep the win that he earned on track after that incident involving he and Charles Leclerc making contact on lap 69 in turn 3 in that pass for what turned out to be the victory. In 2019, we've had this situation a number of times now where we have results changed retroactively after the checkered flag, meaning that the results at the time of the checkered flag being shown are not the official race results. And in my view, this is not a good situation. So I figure, why not try to do everything that we can to eliminate that possibility of having retroactive penalties applied, thereby changing the results that everybody saw on track. Now, of course, I understand that it's not possible to eliminate that possibility 100%. Mostly because sometimes penalties are handed out due to technical infractions which are only evident after scrutineering. In other words, something on the car falls afoul of the rules, and therefore, on occasion, it may be necessary to throw a car out of the event. And in many cases, that can only be uncovered after the event has concluded in post-race scrutineering. However, by and large, most of the penalties that we see in 2019 are not for technical infringements, they're for driver infringements in terms of driver conduct with what they do on the track, only in the placement of their cars in terms of where they are making decisions by themselves with nobody else around them, or in their conduct with other drivers in their general vicinity in terms of contact, track limits, overtaking while exceeding track limits, and things like this. So, notwithstanding technical infractions that could only be uncovered later, looking strictly at driver infractions, here's a proposal for you, a very rough one I will admit, and how we could overhaul how penalties are handed out for driving infringements in Formula 1. It's pretty simple, and it basically reads like this. In my view, all penalties earned during on-track sessions via driver action, so these are not technical infringements, these are things strictly done by the driver consciously. Any penalty that is earned in an on-track session, so that is any time cars are on track, practice, qualifying, or the race, the penalties must be administered, and in the case of a race, they must be served during that same on-track session. So for example, upon an infraction such as leaving the circuit and gaining an advantage, rejoining the circuit unsafely, making contact with other cars and thereby gaining an advantage, driving erratically or slowly without reasonable cause, so not in the case of something's wrong with the car and I've got to slow down to maintain my own safety and maintain the integrity of the car, driving erratically or slowly without any sort of reasonable cause, a pit lane speed violation or flag signal violation, so failing to slow for yellow flags, things like that. The stewards, upon recording the incident, shall have a fixed amount of time. For argument's sake, let's call it 5 minutes, a maximum of 5 minutes to look at the incident, decide if it warrants a penalty, and then to administer a penalty. By penalty in this situation, I'm thinking along the lines of the traditional on-track penalties that we've seen not only in Formula 1 but in pretty much every other racing series. A stop-go penalty or a drive-through penalty. Things that can be served immediately while on track, thereby eliminating the need to go back later and wait for the stewards to make a decision. So they have a maximum of 5 minutes after recording an incident to administer a penalty if it is deemed necessary. Upon receiving the penalty, so the stewards will alert the team, who will then tell the driver that they've received a penalty. Upon receiving a penalty, the driver penalized shall serve the penalty within 3 laps. This is also in keeping with the precedent that already exists. When we see stop-go or drive-through penalties administered, drivers have 3 racing laps under green flag conditions to serve that penalty. Now, I know that some of you are wondering, well, what happens toward the end of the race? What happens if we don't have 3 more laps to go? If an infraction from which a change of position occurs takes place within the final 3 laps of a race, race control shall immediately inform the team running the car, and thereby the driver that committed the infraction, to yield the position or positions gained. So in other words, if somebody goes off track and overtakes, that team is going to be told by race control, hey, tell your driver you have to give that position back. So if we're within 3 laps to go, there's not enough time in theory to allot for the driver to come in and serve a stop-go or drive-through penalty. So give the position back as soon as it's reasonable to do so within the final 3 laps of the race. In this event, if the driver refuses to yield the position that was gained before crossing start-finish on the final lap, in other words, before crossing start-finish with the checkered flag displayed signaling the end of the session, that car shall be shown the black flag at start-finish and shall be disqualified from the event. We told you to give the position back. You didn't, therefore you're disqualified. If something happens in the final couple of corners of the final lap, in other words, there's no time for race control to tell the team, hey, tell your guy to give that position back. If time does not permit, then race control shall display the black and white flag and the car number of the driver under investigation alongside the checkered flag at the start-finish flag stand at race conclusion. So the driver and car under investigation will take the checkered flag and the black and white flag at the termination of the event, meaning, hey, you did something naughty there in the last couple of corners. We didn't have time to review it, but we're reviewing it now. In this circumstance, the stewards then shall render a final decision within 5 minutes of the last car classified taking the checkered flag. So within 5 minutes of all racing being ceased, they will render a decision. In this circumstance, we have to keep the stewards accountable. So if there is something under review at the conclusion of the race, there's not enough time for somebody to serve a penalty on track, then within 5 minutes, the chief steward shall declare the steward's decision from the podium before the podium ceremony begins. So in this situation, let's say there's something that could affect the top 3 finishing order, something that's going to affect who we see on the podium. Before anybody goes on the podium, an FIA steward, the chief steward of the meeting, is going to go on the podium, get a microphone in his hand, stand in front of the TV cameras and all the fans at the circuit, and announce the decision. So we have accountability now toward the FIA, toward the stewards. Make your decision and announce it in full view of the public and give a little bit of a rationale behind it as well. No more waiting for 3 hours. No more wondering for the last 20 laps of a race if somebody went off track, if that was legal or not. No, make the decision in 5 minutes, hand out a penalty, have the driver serve the penalty during the session if time permits, and if not, you're going to make a decision within 5 minutes of the last car taking the checkered flag. Now, understandably, this is not a catch-all. As we mentioned before, technical infractions are very much a thing, and they're not readily apparent most of the time until after a session has concluded. So in that event, technical infractions that are only evident after scrutineering, in other words, post-race scrutineering, shall at most result in a team losing Constructors' Championship points scored by the car found to be illegal during the event from which the infraction was uncovered. So drivers are not going to be losing championship points. We're not going to hurt the drivers' championship. However, the team will lose constructors' points scored by the car or cars found to be in breach of the regulations from the technical side. Of course, if the driver also happened to commit a driving infraction therewith, there could be a further penalty there as well, which hopefully will have been served during the actual race. If a technical infraction occurs during or after qualifying, then the offending car shall be excluded from qualifying and start the race from pit lane after demonstrating to scrutineers that the car specification is race legal. There you go. It's a rough proposal, I know. However, it's a whole lot clearer, it's a whole lot simpler, it's a whole lot more cut and dry than what we see in terms of stewards, nameless stewards in many cases, deliberating behind closed doors for hours after the conclusion of the event while we're all sitting there wondering if what we saw on track is actually what happened. So, again, just an idea, just my 2 cents here. Let me know what you think. Until next time, though, I thank you all very much for listening. For REman601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.